The iron latch burned under his palm. He held it anyway. The rust bit into his skin in thin orange lines, and the heat of the metal was so sharp it felt like cold. Behind the gate, a path of cracked flagstones led through weeds that came up to his knees. The weeds were brown and dry. They snapped under his boots when he pushed the gate open, and the sound was loud in the quiet. August had turned everything the color of old bone. The grass on the hills was yellow. The sky was white, not blue, and the sun sat in it like a coin pressed into clay. No wind, no birds, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer and bend. Quintus stood in the road and looked at the house. Briarlock Lodge. 9 years since he had last stood here. 9 years since he had driven away in a carriage and told the driver not to stop until they reached London. The house was smaller than he remembered. That was always the way. You left a place and it grew in your mind until the real thing could not match it. But the bones were the same. Grey stone. 2 stories. A wing to the east where the kitchen was. A roof that needed work. 3 upstairs windows were boarded over. He walked up the path. The front door was swollen in its frame from years of damp and heat. He put his shoulder against it and pushed. It gave with a groan, and the smell that came out was what he expected and worse. Dust. Old wood. Something dead in the walls. Maybe a rat. Maybe a bird that had come down the chimney and could not get out. The air inside was 10 degrees cooler, and it felt like walking into a cave. The entrance hall was bare. The furniture was gone. He remembered a table against the wall with a blue vase on it. His mother had kept roses in that vase. Both were gone. The floor was stone, cracked in 2 places, and dust covered everything like grey snow. He stood in the hall and listened. The house made small sounds. The wood of the stairs creaked as it swelled in the heat. A fly buzzed somewhere above him, trapped, but underneath those sounds, there was something else. Something that did not belong in an empty house. The smell of dried herbs. It was faint. It came from somewhere deeper in the house. He followed it through the hall and into the corridor that led to the kitchen wing. The corridor was dark. The shutters on the windows were closed. He walked by touch, his fingers trailing along the wall, feeling the old plaster under his hand. At the end of the corridor, a door stood open, and light poured through it in a bright rectangle on the floor. He stopped in the doorway. The kitchen was not empty. Someone had cleaned it. The stone floor had been swept. The long wooden table in the center of the room was scrubbed pale. And hanging from the ceiling beams, in bundles tied with string, were herbs. Rosemary, lavender, something with small grey-green leaves he did not know the name of. The smell was strong here. It was the smell of a garden brought indoors, and it filled the whole room. On the table, a mortar and pestle sat beside a row of small glass bottles. A basket of dried flowers rested on the bench by the window. A kettle sat on the cold stove. Someone was living here. He crossed the kitchen to the back door. It stood open. Beyond it, the kitchen garden spread out in the August sun. He had not thought about the kitchen garden in years. It had been his mother's pride. She had grown roses and herbs and a pear tree against the south wall. Now the roses were gone, but the herbs were everywhere. Rows of them. Green and alive in all that brown and dry. A woman was on her knees in the dirt. She was pulling weeds from between the rows of plants. Her back was to him. She wore a plain cotton dress, the sleeves rolled above her elbows, and a wide-brimmed straw hat that hid her hair. Her hands were dark with soil. Beside her on the ground was a basket, half full of the weeds she had pulled. He watched her for a moment. She did not know he was there. She worked with the steady rhythm of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Pull, shake the dirt from the roots, toss into the basket, move to the next one. No hurry, no wasted movement. He cleared his throat. She turned. The hat tipped back, and he saw her face. She was young. Not a girl, not old, somewhere in between. Brown hair pulled back in a braid that was coming loose. Skin browned from the sun. A face that was not made for paintings. It was made for weather. Strong jaw. Straight nose. eyes that were the grey-green of sage leaves, and right now those eyes were looking at him the way a person looks at someone who has walked into their kitchen without knocking. "Who are you?" she said. Her voice was calm, not frightened, not polite. She asked the question the way you would ask a dog why it was in your garden. "I own this house," Quintus said. She stood up. She brushed her hands on her apron and took off the hat. Her hair was a mess. A piece of dried leaf was stuck in the braid. She did not seem to care. "No," she said. "You own a house in London and an estate in Sussex and a pile of debts that your steward has been managing for years. This house has been empty since before I came. I asked permission to use the kitchen garden from Mr. Ferren Croft, who told me he had the authority to grant it. He did. I have been here for 2 years. Quintus felt his jaw tighten. Ferrand, of course. The steward who ran the northern properties and had been running them with the kind of freedom that comes from an absent owner. Ferrand does not own this house, Quintus said. No, she said again. But he manages it, and he gave me leave to use the garden and the kitchen quarters. I grow medicines for the village. There is no apothecary within 12 miles. People come to me when their children are sick. I am not leaving because you have decided to visit a house you forgot you owned. The words landed like stones. He stood in the doorway, and she stood in the garden, and the sun beat down on both of them. And neither of them moved. What is your name? He asked. Marin, she said. Marin Hale. Well, Marin Hale, I did not forget I owned this house. I left it. There is a difference. I do not care about the difference. I care about the garden and the people who need what grows in it. He looked at her. She looked back. The sun was behind her, and it made the edges of her hair glow like copper wire. Her feet were bare in the dirt. She had taken off her shoes to work in the garden. Her toes were brown, and her feet were tough, and she stood on the hot earth as if it were nothing. I will be staying for some time, he said. I need to see what condition the house is in. Then you will need to eat, she said. There is bread in the cupboard and a jar of honey from the village. The well water is good if you draw it from the south well, not the north one. The north one smells of rust. She put her hat back on and turned away from him. She knelt in the dirt again. She went back to pulling weeds. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he went back inside. The first 3 days they barely spoke. He took the room at the front of the house on the ground floor. It had been his father's study. The desk was still there, and the chair, and the shelves of books that had been left behind, because no one thought they were worth moving. The room smelled of paper and dust, and the faint ghost of pipe smoke. He opened the shutters and let the light in. He wiped the desk with a rag. He sat in the chair and looked at the papers he had brought from London. The house was in bad shape. The roof leaked in 3 places. The east wing was not safe to sleep in. The stables had lost part of their wall. The cost of repairs would be more than the house was worth. He had known this when his London steward handed him the report 3 months ago. He had looked at the numbers and felt nothing. Then he had put the report in a drawer and tried to forget it. But he could not forget it. The house sat in his mind like a stone in a river. It changed the flow of everything around it. He slept badly. He ate less. He found himself standing at windows and not knowing how long he had been there. His friends did not notice at all. So he came. Not to repair the house, not to sell it. He came because he could not stay away any longer, and he did not know what that meant, and he was afraid to look at it too closely. Marin stayed in the kitchen quarters. She had a small room behind the kitchen that had once been the cook's bedroom. She kept it spotless. He knew because he walked past it once and saw the narrow bed with its clean white cover and the pair of stout walking shoes placed neatly beside the door. He did not go into the east wing. He did not go upstairs. He did not walk to the lake. The lake was behind the house, a 1/4 mile through the trees. He kept the upstairs shutters closed and the doors shut. He ate bread and honey in the study and drank water from the south well and worked through the papers, and when the light faded, he sat in the dark and listened to the house settle around him. On the 3rd evening, he heard her singing. It came from the kitchen. A low tune, no words he knew, something that sounded older than the house. He sat in the study with his pen in his hand and listened. She sang while she worked. He could hear the knock of the pestle against the mortar in time with the song. The smell of crushed rosemary came through the house and found him in the dark room, and he set down his pen and breathed it in. He did not go to the kitchen. He sat and listened until the singing stopped and the house was quiet again. On the fourth day, he came out of the study to find the corridor floor had been swept. Not by him. The dust was gone, and the stone underneath was pale and clean. He looked at it and said nothing. On the fifth day, the corridor shutter that had been hanging by one hinge was fixed. Someone had straightened the hinge and driven the pin back in. On the sixth day, he found dried lavender hanging from a hook outside his study door. No note, just lavender, tied with the string she used in the kitchen, swaying in the draught. He left it there. He noticed these things the way you notice weather. They changed the shape of the days without asking. The house had been dead when he arrived. Now it was breathing. Because of her. He did not thank her. But he stopped closing his study door all the way. The smell of herbs came through. The sound of her in the kitchen came through. The house felt less like a tomb. On the seventh evening, the heat broke for an hour. A cloud crossed the sun, and the air cooled just enough that the stone floors stopped radiating warmth. He came out to get water and found her on the back step with a cup. She looked up. He stood in the doorway. The cloud passed and the heat came back, but for that moment the air had been almost kind. "Sit down if you want," she said. "It is your step." He sat down beside her. The stone was warm. The garden stretched out ahead, green against the yellow hills. The pear tree against the south wall had small hard pears that would not be ready for another month. "You have been fixing things," he said. "I have been maintaining things. There is a difference. You fixed the shutter in the corridor. The hinge was loose. It would have fallen off and broken the stone below it. And the floor. The floor needed sweeping. Dust destroys wood finishes over time. And the lavender." She looked at him. The lavender was a gift, not a repair. He held her gaze. She did not look away. Her eyes were the same grey-green they had been in the garden that first day, and they held no apology. "Why?" he asked. "Because the house smelled like something had died in the walls. Lavender covers that better than anything." He almost smiled. He did not, but it was close. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. "The medicines. The garden." "Since I came. 2 years. My father was an apothecary in York. He taught me. When he died, I came south. The village here had no one. Ferren gave me permission to use the garden. The village depends on you. Some of them do. The ones who cannot afford a doctor. The ones with children. The old ones." She paused. "I am not saying this to make you feel guilty. I am saying it because if you throw me out, you should know what you are throwing out." He looked at the garden. The rows of herbs. 2 years of a woman's life, kneeling in the dirt. "I am not going to throw you out," he said. She nodded. She drank from her cup. The water was warm from sitting in the heat. "Why did you come here?" she asked. "After 9 years." He was quiet for a long time. The sun was going down behind the hills, and the light had turned the color of amber. A bird called from somewhere in the trees. The first bird he had heard since he arrived. "My brother died here," he said. He said it flat. The way you say something that has been true for so long it has lost its edges. She did not gasp. She did not reach for his hand. She sat beside him on the warm stone step and waited. "His name was Corin," Quintus said. "He was 16. I was 25. We came here for the summer. Our parents were dead by then. It was just the two of us." He stopped. The bird called again. The light moved. "He drowned in the lake," he said. "I was supposed to be watching him. I was in this house, in the study, reading. He went swimming alone. By the time I reached the water, it was too late." The words sat between them on the step like a third person. "You have not been back since," she said. It was not a question. "No. And now you are here. Now I am here." She did not say she was sorry. She did not say it was not his fault. She sat with him on the step and looked at the garden she had built in the yard of a house that a man had abandoned with his grief, and after a while she said, "The pears will be ready in September. There are more on that tree than one person can eat." It was not comfort. It was not pity. It was a statement about pears. And it was the most generous thing anyone had said to him about his brother in 9 years. He did not tell her more that night. He went back to his study and sat in the dark. But the dark felt different now. It had a shape. The smell of lavender followed him in. The days went on. August held. The heat was a wall around them. Every morning the sky was white. Every afternoon the stones baked. Every evening the air cooled just enough to breathe. He worked on the papers. She worked in the garden. They spoke in passing, but the passing happened more often. He would come to the kitchen for water and she would be grinding something. She would come to the corridor to hang herbs and he would be at the window. Small encounters. But the house was changing. She fixed a kitchen window that had been stuck shut. He repaired the front door hinge that had been groaning. Neither said anything about the other's work. He began to eat in the kitchen. Not at the same time as her. She left bread and cheese and a jar of preserves on the table each morning, and he came in when she was in the garden. One evening she came in while he was still eating. "I am not finished," he said. "I can see that," she said. "I will come back. You do not need to come back. This is your kitchen." She came in and sat on the bench by the window. She began sorting dried leaves into packets. They worked in silence. The lamp made a small circle of yellow light. The smell of the leaves was sharp like pepper and grass. "What is that?" he asked, pointing at the leaves. "Feverfew for headaches. Mrs. Brennan in the village gets them bad. I am making her a packet. You know every plant in this garden. I know what they do. That is different from knowing them." "How is it different?" "Knowing what they do is work. Knowing them is something else." She tied a packet with string. "My father knew them. He could walk into a field and tell you the name of every weed. He talked to them. I thought he was mad when I was a girl. Now I think he was the sanest person I ever knew." She said this without sadness. She had made peace with it long ago. He finished eating. He took his plate to the basin, washed it, dried it, put it back on the shelf. She watched without comment, but he felt her eyes on his hands. The roof leaked. It had been leaking for years, but the first real test came on the 9th day, when thunder split the white sky and rain came down in sheets. The rain hammered the roof and ran down the walls. Within an hour, water was coming through the ceiling in 3 places. He found her in the corridor with a bucket and a ladder. She had placed the bucket under the worst leak and was climbing the ladder with a piece of old canvas in her teeth. "What are you doing?" he said. "The gutter is blocked. If I can clear it, the water will run off instead of through. You will break your neck. The ladder is steady. I have done this before. Give me the canvas." She looked at him. Rain was coming through the ceiling and landing on her hair. She was soaked. She held out the canvas. He took it. He climbed the ladder. The rungs were wet, and his boots slipped once, but he caught himself. He pushed through the trapdoor into the attic. The roof was low and the beams were dark with rot. He found the blocked gutter. Leaves and dead branches had packed into the junction where 2 sections met. The rain had turned them into a dam. He pulled the mess out with his hands. Cold water poured over his wrists. He threw the debris aside and laid the canvas over the gap where a tile was missing. It would hold until the storm passed. He climbed down. She was holding the ladder steady. Her hands were white from gripping the rungs. He stepped off and water ran off his coat. "The leak in the kitchen is worse," she said. "I need another bucket. I will get it." He went to the kitchen. She followed. They spent the next hour moving buckets, mopping floors, and patching gaps with rags. Thunder cracked. Lightning turned the windows white. The house groaned in the wind. When the rain finally slowed, they were both standing in the kitchen, wet through, with buckets full of water around them. The table was pushed to one side. She was breathing hard. So was he. They looked at each other across the wet floor. Her hair was plastered to her head. Water dripped from the ceiling in a slow rhythm. "The gutter needs replacing," he said. "And 3 tiles on the south slope. And the flashing around the chimney. And the window in the east corridor." The rain came in around the frame. They stood there, listing the damage the way 2 people list the wounds of a body. The house was hurt. They had stopped the bleeding. Now they could see how deep it went. "I will send for a roofer in the morning," he said. "There is a man in the village. Tobias Wren. He does good work and does not charge too much. Send him. She nodded. She wrung out her hair over the basin. He watched and looked away. That night, for the first time, the house did not feel empty. It felt damaged. There is a difference. An empty house is nothing. A damaged house is something that needs you. The roofer came. Tobias Wren was a short man with arms like oak branches and a laugh that filled the yard. He climbed to the roof and made sounds that meant bad news. He came down and told them what they already knew. 3 days of work. New tiles, new guttering, new flashing. Quintus paid him. Maren brought him water and bread. Tobias worked from dawn until dark, and the sound of his hammer was the first real work this house had heard in 9 years. During those 3 days, Quintus and Maren were thrown together by the work. She held the ladder while Tobias went up and down. He carried tiles from the cart. She made meals for all three, and for the first time, they ate together. She ate on the bench. He ate at the table. Tobias ate standing up, because sitting down made him lazy, he said. But they were in the same room. They talked about the house, the roof, the walls, the windows, the well. She told him about the families she helped. He asked questions. She answered. He learned that the village had 63 people. He learned that the nearest doctor was in Ashford, 14 miles away. He learned that the schoolmaster had left and no one had replaced him. He learned that the well in the square was low and tasted of chalk. She learned that he had not been to this part of his estate in 9 years. She learned that Ferrand managed everything and sent reports to London that were often wrong. She learned that Quintus had a house in London he barely lived in, and an estate in Sussex he visited twice a year, and no family at all. No wife? She asked, the second evening, while Tobias packed up his tools. No, no children. No, just a house in London and a house in Sussex and this house that you cannot bring yourself to live in. He looked at her. She said things that other people would not say. She said them without malice. She said them the way a doctor says, "This bone is broken." "Yes," he said, "just those." She did not say anything else. She picked up the dishes. But later that night he heard her singing again, the same low tune. The sound came through the house and found him in his study, and for the first time in 9 years, the dark did not feel like punishment. Tobias finished the roof on the 3rd day. He packed his tools and drove his cart down the hill, and the house was quiet again. But it was a different quiet. The roof did not leak. The gutter ran clean. That evening, Quintus walked through the house. He had not done this since the first day. The rooms that had been shut were musty, but dry. The parlour, the dining room, a small sitting room, all empty, all waiting. Then he went to the stairs. He stood at the bottom and looked up. The staircase was stone, wide, with a wooden banister thick with dust. The last time he had climbed these stairs, it had been to carry his brother down. He put his hand on the banister. The dust came away under his palm. He went up. The upstairs corridor was long and dark. He opened the shutters one by one. Light came in. The rooms were small, bedrooms, most of them empty. A trunk in one, covered in a sheet. He did not open it. He walked to the end of the corridor. The last door, on the right. Corin's room. He stood in front of it. His hand was on the door handle. The handle was brass and cold, even in the heat. The door was open. He had not opened it. It was already open. A thin line of light came through. He pushed it with his fingertips and it swung wide. The room was clean. The bed was made. The sheets were white. The window was open and the curtain moved. On the table by the bed, someone had put a vase of wildflowers, yarrow and clover and something blue. The floor had been swept, and Maren was standing by the window. She turned when he came in. She had a rag in her hand. "I did not know this was his room," she said. "I started cleaning the upstairs rooms this morning. I opened this one and saw it was a boy's room. There is a book on the shelf about ships. There is a jacket on the door that is too small for any man." She looked at him. His face was the color of stone. "I can leave," she said. He shook his head. Not to say no. To say, "I cannot speak right now." She understood. She put the rag down. She did not leave. She sat on the edge of the bed. He stood in the doorway. The room smelled of fresh air and wildflowers, and underneath, something old and sweet. The ghost of a boy who had slept here. He was 16, Quintus said. His voice was rough. He was tall for his age. He grew 4 inches that summer. None of his clothes fit. He was always laughing. He laughed when he was cold and when he was hungry, and when he fell off his horse. I told him he laughed too much. I told him a duke's brother should be more serious. He stopped. The curtain moved. The flowers in the vase were bright against the white wall. I told him to be more serious, he said again. And then he died, and the last thing I said to him was a criticism. Maren did not move. She did not speak. She sat on the bed and let the silence hold the words. After a long time, he let go of the handle. He walked into the room. He took down the book about ships. It was small, the kind a boy carries in his pocket. The spine was cracked from use. He read this 4 times that summer, Quintus said. He wanted to join the Navy. I told him it was not suitable. He put the book back. He turned to the door. "Leave the flowers," he said. "Please." He walked out. He went downstairs. He went to his study. He closed the door. Maren sat on the bed for a long time after he left. The curtain moved. The flowers stood in the vase. The jacket on the door was too small for any living person. She got up. She finished wiping the sill. She checked the water in the vase. Then she went out and closed the door, leaving the room clean and bright and full of the small, careful signs of someone who had been there. After that day, something shifted. Between him and the house. He went upstairs the next morning. He opened the shutters in the empty bedrooms. He carried the sheet-covered furniture outside and beat the dust from it. He worked with his sleeves rolled up and his coat off, and the sun burned the back of his neck. Maren worked in the garden. They did not speak about Corinne's room, but he noticed that she put fresh flowers in the vase every morning, different flowers each day. He noticed, and the flowers kept coming. He began to eat in the kitchen every evening. They talked about the house, what needed fixing, what could wait. He made lists. She made suggestions. They disagreed about the dining room. He wanted to strip the paper. She said the paper underneath was older and more beautiful. They went to look. She was right. Under the faded green paper was a hand-painted pattern of vines and birds, done in a blue that had not faded in 40 years. "How did you know?" he asked. "I peeled back a corner last month. I was curious." He looked at the wall. The blue was the color of the sky on a cool day. The vines curved and the birds were mid-flight. Someone had painted this by hand years ago. "We will keep it," he said. "We?" she said. He heard it. The word had come out without thinking. "We, not you." "Not I. We, the house," he said. "The house will keep it." She looked at him with those grey-green eyes. She did not correct him. She just looked at him. And then she nodded. "Good. It is too fine to cover up." The days went on. The garden grew. Maren's herbs were at their best in August, she said. The heat brought out the oils. She harvested rosemary and thyme and sage, and a plant she called betony. She dried them on racks. The smell followed him into his study and into his dreams. He had been at Briarlock for 3 weeks when he heard her talking to someone in the garden. He was at the upstairs corridor window. A woman from the village was there. Old, thin, with a red shawl. She was holding a jar and talking fast. Maren took the jar, opened it, smelled it, and shook her head. She said something. The woman's face crumpled. Maren put her hand on the woman's arm. The woman nodded. She left the jar and walked back toward the village. He went downstairs. He found Maren in the kitchen, examining the jar. She held it up to the light. "Mrs. Brennan's husband," she said. "His cough is worse. She has been making her own remedy. It is mostly honey and whiskey, which will not hurt him, but it will not help either. Can you help him? I can try, but I need supplies I cannot get here. There is an apothecary in Ashford. Oil of thyme. Coltsfoot extract. I have not been to Ashford in months. The walk is too long in this heat." He said nothing. He watched her pour the contents into the basin and wash it out. "Could you send to Ashford?" she asked. "Have someone bring what you need?" "I could," he said, "but I do not know what to ask for." She smiled. It was the first time he had seen her smile. It changed her face. It made her look like someone who had not spent 2 years alone in a house. "I will write a list," she said. He took her list that evening. She had written it in a clear hand. Oil of thyme, coltsfoot extract, linseed, a powder she called ipecac. She had written the apothecary's name and address in Ashford at the bottom. He folded the paper and put it in his coat pocket. He did not tell her what he had planned. She did not ask. She assumed it would take time. He did not want it to take time. The next morning he walked to the village. It was a mile down the hill. The path was dry, and the dust rose with each step. The village was small, a cluster of stone houses around a green that was brown from the heat. A church, a blacksmith's shop, a well in the square where 2 women were drawing water. He found the boy at the blacksmith's shop. He was the blacksmith's son. Ned, 12 years old, skinny, with feet too big for his body, and a face that was all angles. He was sweeping the floor of the shop when Quintus walked in. "I need someone to walk to Ashford," Quintus said. "Can you do that?" The boy looked at him. He looked at the blacksmith, who was his father. The blacksmith looked at Quintus and took off his cap. "Your Grace," the blacksmith said. He had recognized him. The Duke. The one who owned the lodge on the hill and had not been seen in 9 years. "Ned can walk to Ashford," the blacksmith said. "He has done it before. He is quick." "It is 14 miles, Quintus said to the boy. "I need you to go to the apothecary on Church Street. His name is on this paper. Give him the list. He will have a package ready. Bring it back to the lodge. Give it to the woman who works in the kitchen garden." "What do I tell her?" the boy asked. "Tell her it is from the apothecary. Tell her it has been paid for." He gave the boy a coin for the road. He gave him the list. The boy put the coin in his pocket and the list in his shirt and left the shop at a run. Quintus walked back up the hill to the lodge. He did not tell Merrin what he had done. He went to his study and sat down and opened the papers and did not look up. That night he could not sleep. The heat was part of it. August nights were thick and warm, and the air in his room did not move. But it was more than the heat. He lay on the narrow bed and listened to the house. The boards creaked. The walls ticked as they cooled. Somewhere outside, an owl called. He got up. He pulled on his trousers and his boots and his shirt, and he went downstairs without a candle. He knew the house by feel now. He knew which steps creaked and which did not. He went through the kitchen and out the back door into the yard. The moon was nearly full. The garden was silver and black. The herbs stood in their rows like soldiers, their leaves catching the light. The pump stood at the edge of the garden, near the kitchen wall. It was old, cast iron, a handle that had not moved in years. The last time anyone had used it, his mother was alive. Merrin drew water from the south well. She carried it in 2 buckets every morning. He had watched her do it. She did not complain. She did not ask for help. She carried the buckets across the yard and into the kitchen and set them on the counter. And the water sloshed over the edges and wet her sleeves, and she did not seem to notice. He went to the pump. He gripped the handle and pushed. It did not move. He pushed harder. The iron groaned. Something was stuck inside, corroded or jammed with grit. He went to the stable. He found the toolbox. It was rusted, but the tools were usable. He carried it back to the pump and knelt on the ground. He took the pump apart, piece by piece, by the light of the moon. The bolts were stiff. He cut his hand on a sharp edge and did not stop. He cleaned the cylinder. He found the blockage, a nest of rust and dead leaves packed into the valve. He cleared it. He oiled the handle with a can of oil he found on the shelf in the stable. He put the pump back together. He gripped the handle. He pushed down. The handle moved. He pushed again. A sound came from deep in the earth, a gurgle, a cough. Then water came. It came out of the spout in a brown rush, then cleared. Cold, clean water. It poured over his hands and ran down the stones and into the garden bed below. He pumped until the water ran clear and cold. Then he stopped. He put the tools away. He wiped his hands on his trousers. The cut on his hand was still bleeding. He wrapped it with a strip of cloth from his pocket. He went back inside. He went upstairs. He lay on the bed. The house was quiet. The owl had stopped. The moon was going down behind the hills. He did not think about what he had done. He did not think about why. He closed his eyes and slept. In the morning, Maren came to his study door. She was carrying a cup of water. She set it on his desk. "The pump works," she said. He looked up from his papers. "What?" "The kitchen pump. I went to draw water from the well this morning, and I passed the pump and the handle was loose. I pushed it, and water came out." She looked at him. "Did you do that?" "No," he said. "Maybe it was Tobias. He was working on the roof. He might have knocked something loose." She looked at his hand. He had forgotten about the cut. The cloth was brown with dried blood. "What happened to your hand?" "I cut it on a nail in the stable." She looked at the cut. She looked at his face. She did not believe him. He could see that. But she did not press it. "Come to the kitchen," she said. "I will clean it properly." He followed her to the kitchen. She made him sit on the bench. She boiled water and tore a clean strip of linen. She washed the cut with salt water. It stung. He did not flinch. She wrapped the linen around his hand and tied it off. "You should wear gloves when you work in the stable," she said. "I will." She went back to her herbs. He sat on the bench for a moment longer than he needed to. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and clean linen and warm water. The pump handle was visible through the window, and a small puddle of water still sat beneath it, catching the light. He went back to his study. He did not mention the pump again. 2 days later, the old groundskeeper came up the hill. Osric was his name. He was 70 years old and walked with a stick and had been taking care of the lodge grounds since before Quintus was born. He came to the kitchen door with a basket of early apples from the orchard. Maren took the basket. She gave him water. He sat on the step and drank it. "Someone fixed the pump," Osric said. "Did they?" Maren said. I saw him. Came out in the night, I did, to check on the orchard. Saw a light by the pump. It was His Grace, on his knees in the dirt with a wrench and a can of oil. Working by moonlight. The old man drank his water. He did not see me. I did not call out. I thought he might not want to be seen. Maren said nothing. She took the empty cup from Osric's hand and refilled it. "He is not what I expected," Osric said. "When he was a boy, he was always serious. Too serious. His brother was the one with the light in him. But the boy grew up, and now here he is, fixing pumps in the dark." Osric finished his water and left. Maren stood in the kitchen with the apples in her basket and the clean cup in her hand. She looked out the window at the pump. She looked at the door of the study, which was closed. She did not go to him. She did not mention it. She put the apples on the table and began to sort them. But her hands were slower than usual, and she stopped twice and stood still, looking at nothing, and then went back to the apples. The boy came on the 3rd day. Quintus was in the study. He heard the sound first. Not a knock. Not a voice. The sound of footsteps on gravel, slow and uneven. Someone walking the path from the village, but walking wrong. The steps had a limp to them. A drag. The sound of someone who had been walking for a very long time and had run out of whatever had been keeping them going. He got up from the desk. He went to the window. The window of the study looked out on the front of the house. The path. The gate. He saw a figure on the path. Small, a boy. Ned, the blacksmith's son. He was coming up the hill with a package in his arms. The package was wrapped in brown paper and tied with string, and it was heavy. The boy held it against his chest the way you hold something you are afraid to drop. He was in bad shape. His face was red and streaked with sweat. His hair was plastered to his head. His shirt was soaked through. He walked with his head down, each step a decision. His feet were the worst. His shoes had been poor to begin with. Now the soles were gone. The leather uppers flapped with each step. Through the gaps, Quintus could see the raw pink of blistered skin. The boy had walked 28 miles on feet like that, 14 to Ashford, 14 back. In August. In the heat. Quintus started for the door. But he stopped. Maren was already outside. She had come from the kitchen garden. She must have heard the footsteps too. She was walking toward the boy on the path. She was barefoot. She had taken off her shoes to work in the garden, as she always did. Her shoes sat by the kitchen door. Stout leather shoes. Walking shoes. Good ones, with thick soles and strong stitching. The kind of shoes that would last another year if you took care of them. Quintus stood at the window. He did not go out. He watched. Maren reached the boy. She said something. The boy looked up. He held out the package. She took it from him. She set it on the ground. She knelt in front of him. She was looking at his feet. Quintus could not hear what she said. He could see her face, the way it changed, the way the calm, steady expression she wore every day cracked open for 1 second. He saw her jaw tighten. He saw her hands clench. And then he saw her stand up. She walked back to the kitchen door. She picked up her shoes. She walked back to the boy. She knelt again. She took the boy's ruined shoes off his feet. She put her own shoes on his feet. She tied the laces. She pulled the knots tight. The boy tried to pull his feet away. She held them. She tied the second shoe. She stood up. The boy was wearing her shoes. They were too big for him. His feet swam in them. But they were whole. They had soles. They would protect his skin from the hot road and the sharp stones, and the dry, cracked earth. The boy said something. Maren shook her head. She put her hand on his shoulder. She turned him around and pointed him down the path toward the village. The boy looked at her feet. She was standing on the gravel path in her stockings. The gravel was hot. It had been baking in the sun all day. She did not flinch. She stood on it the way she stood on everything, without complaint. The boy walked away. He walked straighter now. The shoes gave him back what the road had taken. He went down the hill and out through the gate and disappeared. Maren picked up the package from the ground. She turned to walk back to the kitchen. She stopped. She must have felt him watching. She looked up at the house. She looked at the study window. She saw him there. Their eyes met across the yard, through the glass, in the August heat. She did not wave. She did not call out. She stood on the hot gravel in her stockings, with the package in her arms, and looked at him. The look lasted 3 seconds. 4, 5, long enough for the heat to blur the air between them, long enough for him to see that her feet were red from the gravel, and she had not looked down at them once. Then she walked inside. The kitchen door closed. The yard was empty. The pump stood in the sun. The path was empty. The gate was open. Quintus stood at the window. His hand was on the frame. The wood was hot under his fingers. He had been gripping it. He let go. There were white marks on his knuckles. He had sent the boy. He had paid for the package. He had arranged all of it. And she had given the boy her shoes, not knowing any of it. She had given her shoes to a stranger because his feet were hurt and she had shoes to give. She had not asked who sent him. She had not waited to find out. She had seen a need, and she had met it with the only thing she had. He sat down at the desk. He put his hands flat on the wood. He looked at them. They were shaking. Not from fear, not from anger, from something he had no name for, something that had been locked in a room in his chest for 9 years, behind a door he had nailed shut, and she had just walked through it without even trying. He sat there for a long time. That evening he came to the kitchen. She was at the table. The package was open. The bottles and packets were laid out in a row. Oil of thyme, coltsfoot extract, linseed, the ipecac powder. Everything on her list. Everything she had needed. She was looking at the label on the package. The apothecary's name in Ashford. The address. She turned the paper over. There was nothing on the back. No note. No name. Just the list, written in her own hand, pinned to the wrapping. She looked up when he came in. He sat at the table. He did not say anything. She did not say anything. The kitchen was quiet. The herbs hung from the ceiling. The lamp made its small circle of light. "The boy brought this," she said. "I saw. He said it was from the apothecary, paid for and ready. Is that what he said?" "Yes," she paused. "The apothecary does not know me. He does not know I exist. Why would he send supplies to a woman he has never met, paid for, with no bill?" Quintus looked at the bottles. He did not answer. "Someone arranged this," she said. "Someone sent that boy to Ashford with my list and paid for everything and told him to bring it here. He met her eyes. She was not angry. She was not grateful. She was looking at him the way she always looked at him. Direct, clear, the way a person looks at something they are trying to understand. "You gave him your shoes," he said. She blinked. That was not what she had expected him to say. "His feet were raw," she said. "He had walked 28 miles. He is 12 years old. You gave him your shoes, and you walked back on the gravel in your stockings. The gravel was hot enough to burn. I have tough feet. You were bleeding." She looked down at her feet. He was right. The gravel had cut through the stockings. There were small red marks on the soles of her feet. She had not mentioned them. She had not tended to them. She had come inside, opened the package, and sat down to work. "Let me see," he said. "They are fine. Let me see." She put her feet on the bench. He knelt on the floor. He took a clean cloth from the basin. He wet it with water from the pump he had fixed in the dark, and he washed the cuts on her feet. The water was cold. She did not pull away. He dried her feet with a dry cloth. He wrapped the worst cut on her left foot with a strip of linen. He was on his knees on the kitchen floor, holding her foot in his hand, and the world was very small and very still. The herbs smelled of summer. The water from the pump smelled of earth and iron. Her skin was warm under his fingers. "You sent the boy," she said. It was not a question this time. "Yes, you did not tell me." "No. Why?" He set her foot down on the bench. He stood up. He looked at her. "Because you needed the supplies. And because if I told you, you would have said it was too much trouble. You would have said I did not need to bother. You would have found a way to refuse." She was quiet. He was right, and they both knew it. "Mrs. Brennan's husband needs the medicine," he said. "That is all there is to it. That is not all there is to it." He looked at her. She held his gaze. The grey-green eyes, the strong jaw, the face that was made for weather, not for paintings. "No," he said, "it is not." Ferrand-Croft arrived 4 days later. He came in a carriage. He was a tall man, thin, with a face like a closed door. He wore a black coat that was too warm for August, and he carried a leather case. He walked up the path to the front door, as if he owned the place. In a way, he had been acting as if he did for 9 years. Quintus met him in the entrance hall. The dust was gone from the floor now. The shutters were open. The light came in. "Your Grace," Ferrand said, "I did not expect you to stay so long. Clearly, I have brought the quarterly accounts. There are matters in London that require your attention. The Somerset property. The investment in the shipping concern. These cannot wait. They have waited 3 weeks. They can wait longer." Ferrand's mouth thinned. He set the leather case on the floor. He looked around the entrance hall. He saw the swept floor, the open shutters, the light. "I see the house has been attended to," he said. "It has." "The woman," Ferrand said. "The one who took the garden. She is still here, I take it. Her name is Merrin Hale. She is still here. She will be staying." Ferrand looked at him. The look was careful, calculating, the look of a man who has had his own way for a long time and is not sure how to adjust. "Your Grace, I must speak plainly. The woman is a nuisance. She has no right to be here. I gave her leave to use the garden as a kindness. Nothing more. She has expanded beyond what was agreed. She has taken rooms. She has been fixing things. She is living in your house as if it were her own. She is living in my house because I have asked her to stay." "Asked," Ferrand repeated the word as if it tasted wrong. "Your Grace, I have managed this property for 9 years. I have kept it in reasonable condition. I have kept the tenants in line. I have kept the accounts balanced, and now you arrive and in 3 weeks you have let a woman with no name and no family take root in a house that has been in yours for 4 generations. Quintus looked at him. The entrance hall was quiet. The dust motes hung in the light from the open shutters. "Be careful what you say next," Quintus said. Ferrand was not careful. He was a man who had been too comfortable for too long, and comfort makes people reckless. He turned to Merrin, who had come to the corridor entrance. She stood there with her hands at her sides. She wore her work dress and her apron. Her hair was in its braid. Her feet were bare, as they always were in the house. The cuts from the gravel had healed. She stood in the corridor and looked at Ferrand the way she looked at everything, without fear. Ferrand looked at her. He smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who is about to say something he has been thinking for a long time. "Miss Hale," he said, "you have done well for yourself. A house, a garden, a duke who fixes pumps in the dark. But you should know what you are. You are a weed in a garden that was here before you and will be here after you. And weeds do not last." The words hung in the entrance hall. The light from the shutters fell on the floor in long golden bars. The house was silent. Maren looked at Ferrand. She did not speak. She did not flinch. She stood in the corridor and looked at him the way you look at something small and unpleasant that has crawled onto a clean floor. Then she walked past him. She walked to the kitchen. She closed the door behind her. Quintus looked at Ferrand. His face was something Ferrand had never seen before. Not anger, not cold, something deeper. Something that had the weight of 9 years and 28 miles and a pair of shoes given to a stranger. "You are dismissed," Quintus said. "From this property, from the northern properties, from my service. Your Grace, you will leave today. You will send the accounts to London. You will not speak to Miss Hale. You will not speak about Miss Hale. You will not come back." Ferrand's face went white. He picked up his leather case. He turned and walked out the front door. The door closed behind him. The carriage drove away. The sound of the wheels on the gravel faded. The house was quiet again. Quintus went to the kitchen door. He opened it. She was at the table. She was grinding something in the mortar. The pestle knocked against the stone in a steady rhythm. She did not look up. "He is gone," Quintus said. "I heard. He will not come back." No. He stood in the doorway. She ground the herbs. The smell of crushed leaves rose between them. The kitchen was warm and full of the late afternoon light. The pump was visible through the window. The garden was green and alive. The pear tree against the south wall was heavy with fruit that was almost ready. "There is something I need to tell you," he said. She stopped grinding. She looked at him. "I came here to sell this house," he said. "I had a buyer in London, a man who wanted it for the land. He offered a fair price. I came to look at it one last time before I signed the papers." He paused. The light moved across the floor. "I am not going to sell it," he said. She was quiet. She held the pestle in her hand. Her knuckles were white around it. "Why?" she asked. He looked at the kitchen, the herbs on the ceiling, the clean floor, the bottles on the shelf, the window that looked out on the garden she had built with 2 years of her hands and her knees and her sweat, the pump he had fixed in the dark, the flowers she put in a dead boy's room every morning. "Because someone fixed the shutter and swept the floor and hung lavender outside my door," he said. "Because someone gave her shoes to a boy she did not know because his feet were hurt. Because someone put flowers in a room that I could not walk into and made it so that I could." He stopped. He did not say he loved her. He did not say the word. He said what was true. Because this house was empty for 9 years. And it is not empty anymore. She set the pestle down. She stood up. She walked across the kitchen. She stopped in front of him. She was close enough that he could smell the herbs on her hands, and the warm stone on her skin, and the clean water from the pump in her hair. She reached up and took his hand, the one with the scar from the pump. She held it. She did not squeeze. She did not let go. "Good," she said, "because the pears are almost ready, and I cannot reach the high branches, and you are taller than me." He looked at her. She looked at him. And something that had been locked in a room in his chest for 9 years opened, not with a crash, but with a click, the way a door opens when the pressure on both sides is finally the same. The pump drew water for the first time in 9 years that evening. The sound of it filled the yard like a heartbeat. Maren stood with wet hands and rolled sleeves. Quintus stood beside her with the lantern he had used to fix it, though he had not said so. The August heat had broken at last. A cool wind moved through the open kitchen door, carrying the smell of dried lavender and warm stone. The house was not finished. Half the windows still needed glass. But the kitchen was clean, the pump worked, and the herbs hung in bunches from the ceiling. Two people stood in the yard at dusk who had both, without saying so, decided to stay.